John sat on the edge of his small bed staring at the last $900 in his bank account. The apartment felt empty and cold. The walls were plain, the carpet was worn, and the little furniture he had looked tired. His job paid just enough to cover bills, and every day seemed the same. He wanted more from life. He wanted something real, something that belonged to him. He wanted a place to call home. One evening, after a long day at work, John scrolled through property listings on his old laptop. Most homes were too expensive, and he felt discouraged. Then a picture caught his attention. It was an abandoned farm on the edge of town. The house was small and broken, the fields were overgrown, and the roof looked weak. The price was low, so low that John felt a spark of hope. His heart beat faster. Could this be his chance to start fresh? He clicked on the listing. The farm had been empty for years. People in town said it was worthless, too old, and too far from everything. Yet something about it called to John. He imagined waking up to the sun rising over the fields, breathing fresh air, and working with his hands. He imagined living in a place that was truly his. The thought made his chest feel warm, even though the house looked like a ruin. John knew it was risky. He had only $900, and buying the farm would leave him with nothing. If he failed, he could lose everything. But if he succeeded, it could change his life completely. He thought about staying in his apartment, doing the same old routine, feeling the same emptiness. The choice was clear. The next morning, John made the call. He met the owner, an elderly man named Mr. Harris, who had not visited the farm in years. Mr. Harris explained that many people had looked at the property, but none had bought it. "It needs someone with patience," he said. "It has potential, but it will not be easy." John nodded. He felt a mix of fear and excitement. He signed the papers. The $900 was gone, and the farm was his. When John first arrived, the farm looked even worse than in the pictures. The paint on the house was peeling, the windows were broken, and the door hung crooked on its hinges. Weeds covered the yard, and tall grass brushed against his legs as he walked. The barn was half hidden by vines, and the fence had fallen apart. Some might have turned away, but John felt a strange sense of hope. He saw possibilities where others saw only ruin. He took a deep breath and walked inside the house. Dust filled the air, and the floorboards creaked under his feet. He opened the cabinets and found broken dishes and old jars covered in cobwebs. The room smelled of old wood and earth. John smiled. It was nothing like the clean apartments he had rented before, but this was real. This was his. John spent the first week cleaning. He moved debris, swept floors, and repaired small things he could manage. Each day was tiring, but it felt good. He woke up early, worked hard, and fell asleep with satisfaction. Slowly, the house began to look a little more like home. The yard started to clear, and he even planted a small patch of vegetables. He dreamed of a life where he would grow more crops, raise animals, and have a peaceful place to live. At night, John would sit on the steps of the porch looking at the stars. The silence of the farm felt comforting. He could hear the wind in the trees and the distant calls of birds. It was different from the city, and he loved it. The farm had given him something no apartment ever could, a sense of freedom and hope. John thought about the risk he had taken. He had spent his last $900, but he had gained a chance for a new life. He realized that sometimes the biggest changes in life came from bold decisions. Sitting on the porch, he made a promise to himself. He would work hard, care for this land, and never give up. No matter how difficult it got, he would turn this abandoned farm into a home. For the first time in a long time, John felt truly alive. The next morning, John woke before sunrise. The air was cool and fresh, and the farm looked quiet under the soft light of dawn. Birds chirped softly in the trees, and the wind moved gently through the tall grass. John stretched and felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today he would begin exploring the farm more carefully. He walked through the yard, stepping over broken boards and fallen branches. The barn loomed in the distance, its wood dark and weathered. The fences around the property were weak, some parts had fallen, and the gate creaked whenever he touched it. Still, John saw potential. He imagined fixing the fences, painting the barn, and planting rows of crops in the open fields. The work would be hard, but he felt ready. Inside the house, the problems were even clearer. The roof leaked in several places, and the ceiling had dark stains from old water damage. The floors were uneven, and the kitchen cabinets had holes. John ran his hands over the walls and floors, feeling the rough surfaces. He did not feel discouraged. Instead, he smiled. Each repair he made would bring the house closer to being his home. John started with small tasks. He swept the floors and removed broken furniture. He cleared out old boxes and garbage left behind by previous owners. Each item he threw away made the rooms feel larger and brighter. Even though the work was tiring, he enjoyed seeing immediate results. The house slowly began to feel less like an abandoned building and more like a home he could live in. In the yard, John pulled weeds from the garden patch and cut overgrown grass. The sun rose higher and he felt sweat on his forehead, but he did not stop. Every movement made him feel connected to the land. He imagined vegetables growing in neat rows and fruit trees full of ripe fruit. He pictured animals grazing peacefully in the fields. The farm felt alive in his imagination, even though it was still empty and broken. While exploring the barn, John noticed old tools and equipment scattered across the floor. Some were rusty, but others were usable. He organized them carefully, cleaning and repairing what he could. The barn smelled of wood and earth, and sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls. John felt a quiet happiness as he worked. He knew that this place had history, and he wanted to honor it by taking care of it. By the afternoon, John had made significant progress. The kitchen looked cleaner. The floors were swept and the garden area was partially cleared. He paused to drink water and sat on the porch looking at the fields. The sun cast long shadows over the grass and the wind whispered through the trees. For the first time, John felt a real connection to the farm. It was not just land and buildings. It was a place where he could build a future. As evening approached, John lit a small lamp in the living room. He cooked a simple meal and ate while looking out the window at the fading light. The sky turned orange and pink and the farm seemed peaceful and calm. He thought about the long journey ahead. There would be many challenges, but he felt determined. The farm had chosen him in a way, giving him a chance to start over and create something meaningful. Before going to bed, John walked through the fields one last time. He touched the grass, smelled the earth, and listened to the sounds of the farm at night. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Even though the house was old, the fences were broken, and the land was wild, John knew he had made the right choice. This was the beginning of a new life, and he was ready for it. John climbed into bed, tired but happy. The farm was not perfect, but it was real. He closed his eyes and imagined the days to come, repairing, planting, growing, and discovering all the secrets the farm might hold. The possibilities felt endless. For the first time in years, John fell asleep with hope in his heart. The abandoned farm was no longer just a building and land. It had become a place of opportunity, and John knew that with patience and hard work, he could turn it into a home full of life and happiness. A few days after settling in, John decided to explore the barn more carefully. During his first look, he had only seen the outside and walked around a little. Now he wanted to understand what the barn really held. The sun was high in the sky and the farm felt warm and alive. Birds chirped loudly and the breeze carried the smell of fresh earth. John walked through the tall grass holding a small flashlight, even though it was daytime. The barn was large with walls made of old, dark wood. Vines climbed up its sides, twisting around the beams and posts. The door creaked loudly as John pushed it open. Dust swirled in the sunlight and the smell of old wood and earth filled his nose. He stepped inside carefully, watching the floor for broken boards. The barn seemed quiet, almost too quiet. John's heart beat faster with curiosity. Inside, he found old farming tools scattered around. Rusted shovels leaned against the walls and broken wheelbarrows lay on the floor. He spotted sacks of hay that had mostly crumbled with time. It was clear the barn had not been used for many years. John began organizing some of the tools and sweeping the dirt-covered floor. Even in disrepair, he imagined the barn as it might have been decades ago, full of activity and life. While moving a pile of old wooden crates, John noticed something strange. A loose floorboard was partially hidden under a thick layer of dust. It looked different from the others. He knelt down and pressed it with his hand. The board shifted slightly, revealing a small trapdoor underneath. John's eyes widened. He had not expected to find anything like this. His hands trembled as he lifted the trapdoor carefully. Beneath it was a dark, narrow tunnel. It looked like it went straight down into the ground. A cool, musty smell came from the opening. John shone his flashlight inside and saw that the tunnel's walls were made of old stone. The passage was small, but it seemed solid and safe. John's heart raced. Could this be a secret hiding place? Why had no one noticed it before? The questions made him both nervous and excited. John considered what to do next. He could wait and come back with more tools, or he could explore carefully now. His curiosity won. He grabbed the flashlight and slowly crawled into the tunnel. The passage was tight and dust floated in the air, making him cough a little. He moved carefully, using his hands to balance on the stone walls. Each step made him feel like he was entering a hidden part of history. After a few minutes, John reached the end of the tunnel. He shone the light around and saw a small underground room. The walls were made of stone and the floor was covered in crates and boxes. John's breath caught in his throat. He could not believe what he saw. Some crates were filled with coins, others with old jewelry, and some held antique items that looked valuable. The treasure was hidden yet perfectly preserved over the years. John sank to his knees. His hands shook as he lifted a gold coin from one of the crates. It was real and heavy. He picked up a small jewelry box and opened it carefully. Inside were rings, necklaces, and other treasures, all sparkling even in the dim light. John felt tears rise to his eyes. He could not believe his luck. The abandoned farm, which had seemed empty and worthless, was hiding something incredible. For a moment, John sat quietly, letting the discovery sink in. He thought about the farm and how he had almost given up on life. Now this hidden fortune promised not only financial security, but also a new chapter in his life. He smiled through his tears. The farm was more than a fresh start. It was a miracle waiting for someone patient enough to find it. John knew he had to be careful. He would keep this secret for now and plan how to handle it safely, but in that moment he allowed himself to feel happiness and wonder. The farm, which he had bought with only $900, had more value than he could have imagined. He crawled out of the tunnel slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. The hidden barn had changed everything. After the excitement in the barn, John spent the night thinking about what he had found. He could not sleep. The thought of crates filled with gold coins, jewelry, and antique items filled his mind. He kept turning the possibilities over and over. How could a farm so abandoned hide something so valuable? How had no one found it before? The questions made him even more curious. The next morning, John returned to the barn with gloves, a flashlight, and a notebook. He wanted to examine the hidden room carefully. The sun was rising over the fields, casting golden light across the farm. The birds were singing, and the air felt fresh and warm. John felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today, he would fully discover what the hidden room held. He pushed aside the loose floorboard and crawled into the narrow tunnel again. The walls were cool and rough under his hands. Dust floated in the air as he moved, but he felt careful and alert. When he reached the small underground room, he stopped for a moment. His eyes widened as he looked around. The crates were still there, perfectly preserved. The gold coins glinted in the light of his flashlight, and the jewelry sparkled as if it had been waiting for him. John knelt down beside one of the crates. He opened it carefully and lifted a handful of coins. They were heavy and warm to touch. His heart beat fast. He examined each coin, noticing the intricate designs and the shine that had survived decades underground. He then opened another crate filled with jewelry. Necklaces, rings, and bracelets lay in soft velvet. John picked up a small golden ring and held it in his hand. He could hardly believe that this treasure had been hidden beneath the farm for so many years. He moved from crate to crate, carefully cataloging the items in his notebook. Some crates held old documents and letters. John read through them and realized they told the story of a family who had lived on the farm many years ago. They had hidden their wealth during a time of uncertainty, planning to return for it later. But they never did. The farm had been abandoned and the treasure forgotten. John felt connected to this story. He was now part of the farm's history, the one who had found the hidden fortune. As he examined the treasures, John felt tears fill his eyes. He had struggled for months living in a small apartment with little money, unsure of the future. Now everything had changed. The farm, which he had bought with his last $900, was more valuable than he could have imagined. The tears ran down his cheeks, not just because of the money, but because he realized he had made the right choice. He had trusted his instincts, taken a risk, and now life had rewarded him. John spent hours in the hidden room, carefully handling the treasure. He imagined what he could do with it. He could repair the farm completely, plant crops, raise animals, and build a home that was warm and welcoming. He could help his family and neighbors, and even share some of the treasure with people in need. The possibilities felt endless. When he finally crawled out of the tunnel, John sat on the porch of the barn and took a deep breath. The wind moved through the trees and the farm seemed brighter than ever. He looked out over the fields, imagining the future. For the first time, he felt a sense of security and hope that he had never known before. John knew that discovering the treasure was only the beginning. The work to restore the farm and manage the wealth would take time, patience, and careful planning. But he was ready. The hidden fortune had given him a new start, and he promised himself he would honor it. He would take care of the land, the history, and the treasure, creating a life filled with purpose and happiness. That night, John went to bed with a smile on his face. The farm was no longer just an abandoned place. It had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the rewards that come to those who are patient and brave. John closed his eyes, feeling grateful and excited. His life had changed forever, and he was ready to embrace the future. After discovering the hidden treasure, John felt a new sense of purpose. He had worked hard to clean the farm and make it livable, but now he could do so much more. The gold, jewelry, and antiques gave him the resources to transform the farm completely. He started making plans for the future, imagining a life filled with work, beauty, and peace. The first task was repairing the house. John bought new wood for the roof, fixed broken windows, and painted the walls in bright, warm colors. Each repair made the house feel stronger and safer. He installed better doors, repaired the floors, and replaced old furniture with simple but sturdy pieces. With each step, the house began to feel like a home. John could see his effort turning into comfort. Next, he focused on the land. The fields were overgrown, so John spent long days clearing weeds, pulling stones, and leveling the soil. He planted rows of vegetables, fruit trees, and flowers. He built fences to protect the crops and created spaces for future animals. Slowly, the farm began to look alive. The work was hard, but John enjoyed every moment. The farm responded to his care, and he felt proud of what he was creating. The barn became a central part of his work. He repaired the old structure, cleaned it thoroughly, and organized the tools. He added shelves and storage for equipment, seeds, and supplies. The hidden room with the treasure remained a secret, a private reward for his courage and patience. John also started planning spaces for animals, imagining chickens in one corner and goats in another. The barn, once dark and empty, now felt full of possibility. As the farm began to transform, neighbors started noticing the changes. Some came to greet John and see what he was doing. They were impressed by the progress and inspired by his hard work. John shared stories of his journey, from buying the abandoned farm with his last $900 to discovering the hidden treasure. People listened with amazement. Some offered to help with work, while others brought small gifts or tools. The farm became a part of the community, a place where people felt welcome and inspired. John also thought about the local community. He realized that he could use some of the treasure to help others. He fixed roads and repaired fences that belonged to neighbors, shared food from his farm, and helped local children learn about planting and caring for animals. His small farm became a place of generosity, and John felt happiness grow in his heart. The treasure had given him security, but it was the ability to make life better for others that gave him joy. The work continued day after day. John learned new skills as he repaired buildings, planted crops, and cared for animals. He discovered patience and resilience he had never known before. Each day brought new challenges, but John faced them with determination. Slowly, the farm became what he had imagined, a place full of life, work, and beauty. At night, John often sat on the porch looking at the sunset. The sky glowed orange and pink, and the field stretched out like a golden carpet. He felt peace he had never known in the city apartment. The farm, the treasure, and the work he had done had changed him. He felt strong, confident, and happy. His life had turned from struggle and worry to purpose and hope. John understood that the real treasure was not only gold or jewelry. It was the opportunity the farm had given him to work hard, create beauty, help others, and live a life he loved. Each sunrise reminded him of how far he had come and how much he had achieved. The abandoned farm, once a place of emptiness, had become a home full of life and meaning. For the first time, John felt fully alive. The farm was no longer just a place, it was a life transformed. He had taken a risk, believed in himself, and discovered both fortune and purpose. The work ahead was still long, but John was ready. With the treasure in his own hands, he would continue to build a life filled with joy, hope, and endless possibilities. As the seasons changed, John's farm began to thrive. Crops grew tall and green, fruit trees carried heavy branches of ripe fruit, and the animals wandered happily in the fields. John felt proud of his work, but he also realized that the farm was teaching him lessons he had never learned before. The land demanded patience, care, and respect. Every morning, John woke early, often before the sun rose. He fed the animals, watered the crops, and checked the fences. Each task required attention and dedication. Some days were easy, but others were difficult. Heavy rain made the soil muddy and hard to work. Strong winds broke branches from trees. Sometimes animals got sick, and John had to find ways to help them recover. The work was never-ending, but it taught him persistence. John also learned to understand the rhythms of the land. He noticed how the soil changed with the seasons, how certain plants grew better in the sunlight, and how animals responded to the weather. He began to predict storms by watching the sky and listening to the wind. The farm taught him to observe, to think ahead, and to act carefully. Every success felt earned, and every problem became a lesson. One afternoon, John walked through the fields and stopped near the barn. He looked at the rows of crops swaying in the wind, and the chickens pecking happily at the ground. He realized that the farm had given him more than treasure. It had given him knowledge, confidence, and a sense of responsibility. The wealth he had found underground was valuable, but it was the work and learning on the surface that made life meaningful. Sometimes John faced moments of frustration. Plants would fail to grow, fences would fall again, or the roof would leak after a storm. At first, these moments discouraged him, but over time, he learned to accept them. Mistakes were part of the process. Problems were challenges to overcome. The land had taught him resilience. Every time he repaired a fence or replanted a failed crop, he felt stronger and more capable. John also learned the value of planning. He kept a notebook where he wrote down his observations, ideas, and schedules. He tracked which crops grew best in certain areas, when to feed the animals, and how to care for each part of the farm. Over time, he saw how organization and preparation could make life smoother. The farm demanded discipline, and John's daily routines became a source of pride. Even in quiet moments, the farm taught him lessons. Sitting on the porch during sunset, John watched the shadows stretch across the fields. He thought about the farm's past, about the people who had lived and worked there long ago. He felt connected to them, understanding that every person who cared for the land had left a part of themselves behind. The farm was not just his. It was part of a long history of effort and care. One morning, John helped a neighbor plant a new orchard. He shared his knowledge about soil, water, and plant care. Seeing the neighbor's joy as the trees began to grow gave John a new sense of fulfillment. He realized that the lessons he had learned on his farm could help others. The land had not only transformed his life, but also allowed him to make a difference in his community. As the months passed, John felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The farm was thriving. The animals were healthy and the crops were abundant. But more than that, John himself had changed. He had learned patience, perseverance, observation, planning, and the value of hard work. The farm had become a teacher, showing him that true wealth was not only in gold or treasure, but in experience, knowledge, and the ability to create life from the land. John often smiled as he walked through the fields, feeling the soil under his hands and the sun on his face. He knew that the farm had given him a life filled with purpose and meaning. Every day brought new lessons, and every lesson made him stronger. The abandoned farm that had seemed empty and hopeless was now a source of wisdom, hope, and endless possibility. John understood clearly that the land was more than property. It was a teacher, a companion, and a mirror of his own growth. He felt grateful, knowing that with patience and care he could continue to learn, grow, and build a life full of happiness and fulfillment. One bright morning, John was working in the fields when he noticed a car slowly driving down the dirt road leading to the farm. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and watched as the vehicle stopped near the entrance. A man stepped out carrying a small bag and a notebook. He looked around with careful interest as if studying every detail. John felt curious. Visitors were rare at the farm, and he wondered who this person could be. The man introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, a local historian. He explained that he studied the history of old properties in the area and was particularly interested in abandoned farms. John smiled and invited him to walk around the property. He was proud of how the farm had transformed. The fields were green, the barn was repaired, and the house looked warm and welcoming. He felt ready to share his story. As they walked, Mr. Thompson asked questions about the farm's history, the old buildings, and the surrounding land. John told him about his discovery of the hidden room and the treasure beneath the barn. The historian's eyes widened with interest. He asked to see the barn, and John led him carefully to the entrance. The old wood creaked under their steps, but the barn was solid and well organized. Mr. Thompson examined the crates in the hidden room, but he did not touch the treasure. Instead, he took notes and photographs. "This is remarkable," he said quietly. "These items are not just valuable in money. They tell the story of a family who lived here long ago. They hid their possessions carefully, perhaps during a time of trouble, and never returned. You have found a piece of history." John listened, fascinated. He had not thought about the treasure as part of a story from the past. The thought made him feel connected to the land and its history in a new way. The historian explained that some of the items in the hidden room were considered artifacts. Coins, jewelry, and letters could help researchers understand life in the past. John realized that the farm was more than a place to live. It was a bridge to history, a place that carried stories waiting to be discovered. He felt proud to be the one caring for it now. During the visit, Mr. Thompson also asked about the farm itself. John shared how he had repaired the house, planted crops, and cared for the animals. The historian smiled. "This is more than a home," he said. "You have preserved history and created a place that continues to grow. It is a rare achievement." John felt a warm sense of pride. He realized that his hard work had value far beyond money. Before leaving, Mr. Thompson suggested that John document the history of the farm. He offered guidance on how to record what he knew and preserve the treasure safely. John agreed. He wanted future generations to understand the story of the farm and the people who had hidden their belongings long ago. The farm had become not only a home and a source of fortune, but also a guardian of history. After the historian left, John walked through the fields and thought about the day's events. The farm had given him more than work, crops, and treasure. It had given him a connection to the past and a sense of purpose. He realized that caring for the land was about more than planting seeds or fixing buildings. It was about honoring the people who had been there before him and protecting what they had left behind. That evening, John sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. The colors of the sky reflected in the windows of the barn and the fields beyond. He thought about the treasure hidden underground, the farm's history, and the lessons he had learned. Each discovery made him more grateful for the decision he had made months ago. The farm had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. It had given him security, knowledge, hope, and a connection to history. As he watched the stars appear in the night sky, John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The abandoned farm was no longer forgotten. It had become a place of life, learning, and lasting meaning. Years had passed since John bought the abandoned farm with his last $900. The small broken house had become a strong, warm home. The fields once covered with weeds were now filled with green crops and colorful flowers. Fruit trees lined the edges of the property, their branches heavy with apples, peaches, and cherries. The barn was sturdy and organized, with spaces for tools, supplies, and animals. Chickens roamed the yard, goats grazed in the fields, and a small herd of cows provided milk. The farm was alive, and so was John. Every morning, John woke with purpose. He fed the animals, checked the crops, and repaired anything that needed attention. The work was steady and demanding, but it filled him with joy. He had learned to listen to the land, to notice small changes, and to respond carefully. Each day brought new lessons, and each lesson strengthened his connection to the farm. He felt a deep satisfaction that he had never known in the city. The hidden treasure in the barn remained carefully stored. John had decided to preserve it not for spending, but as a part of the farm's history. The coins, jewelry, and antiques were documented, and John occasionally showed them to historians who visited. The treasure had brought him security, but it was the life he had built on the land that brought him real happiness. He realized that the farm itself, and the work he had done to restore it, was more valuable than gold. John also became a part of the local community. People came to learn from him about farming, planting, and animal care. Children visited to see the crops and animals, asking questions about the farm's history. John taught them patiently, showing them how to plant seeds, care for trees, and respect the land. The farm had become a place of learning and inspiration. John felt proud that his home could help others grow and learn. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the fields, John walked through the orchard. He touched the leaves of the trees, smelled the fresh fruit, and listened to the soft sounds of nature. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. From the small apartment in the city to the abandoned farm, from empty fields to thriving crops, from uncertainty to hope. Every step had shaped his life. The decision to spend his last $900 had been risky, but it had led him to a life full of meaning. John often reflected on the lessons he had learned. Patience, hard work, perseverance, and respect for the land were more important than money. The farm had taught him how to care for something greater than himself. It had given him a sense of accomplishment, a place to call home, and a connection to the past. The treasure had been a gift, but the true reward was the life he had built. In the evenings, John sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and pink, and the fields stretched out like a golden carpet. The animals rested peacefully, and the barn stood strong in the fading light. John felt a quiet joy in his heart. He remembered the day he had first arrived, exhausted but hopeful, and he smiled. The farm had grown with him, and he had grown with it. As the stars appeared one by one, John thought about the future. The farm would continue to grow, and so would he. He planned to plant new crops, build more shelters for animals, and preserve the history of the land for generations to come. Every step he took would honor the people who had lived here before and the treasure they had left behind. John felt complete. The abandoned farm, which had once seemed empty and hopeless, had become a home filled with life, learning, and love. He had turned his last $900 into a life of purpose, joy, and fulfillment. Sitting on the porch, feeling the cool night air, John smiled and whispered a quiet thanks to the land that had changed his life. The farm was no longer just a place. It was a living story, a source of happiness, and a testament to courage, patience, and hope. John had discovered that true wealth was not only in treasure, but in the life you build, the lessons you learn, and the joy you share. He closed his eyes, feeling peace and contentment, knowing that he had found a home where his heart truly belonged.